this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus. I woke up this morning with my mind.
Hello, everybody. Joey Sparks here. This is your reminder that God's mercies are new. Once again this morning, what is it that makes sin so bad? There are a few sins. It's pretty obvious, and we can understand it's bad, it's wrong because of its consequences. Murder, for instance, robs someone of their life. Adultery breaks and destroys a covenant, a relationship, a sense of trust between husband and wife. But other sins may be less difficult to know exactly why it is so devastating and so consequential. Romans opens by showing us that both Jew and Gentile are all in this together, in that they are all guilty of violating God's law and thus have sin. In so doing, Paul also makes it clear this is why sin is so tragic and so devastating. So there are two bookends to this first section. Once you get past the opening section of the book, you get into chapter 1 and verse 17 or verse 18, we might say, begins this next section. Verse 18 is the opening bookend. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness, catch it, suppress the truth. So as he opens and introduces this section as to why the Gentiles are especially egregious in their sin, he says unrighteousness, ungodliness suppresses the truth about God. It's highly consequential. At the end of this section, chapter 3, this is now a section where he's been discussing the sinfulness of the Jews, why they are guilty and lost because of sin. He says, verse 23, there is, or at the end of verse 22 actually, there is no distinction, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So there, he's saying the Jews, you're just as lost as the Gentiles. Those who are outside of Christ, if you're a Jew, you're just as lost as the Gentiles. There's no distinction. And we all sinned and fall short of his glory. So that's another reason that sin is so devastating. It falls short of God's glorious standard. Now, within each section, what you find is that the Gentiles were especially guilty of rejecting what should have been and was clear to them and revealed to them by God in nature, the natural law, we might say. So chapter 1, verse 20, especially for his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. They've rejected what should have been known clearly in nature, so they're lost. But then you turn to the Gentiles, the next section that begins in chapter 2. Later in verse 23 of chapter 2, he says, Jews, here's why you're lost. You who boast in the law, dishonor God by breaking the law. So you've been given the oracles of God. You've been given the written law, and you break it. You do not honor the written, revealed, moral law of God. So both of those reasons are why sin is so devastating. It rejects what God has made clear in nature and in creation. It also rejects what God has written and revealed in his word. I love that Psalm number 19 is organized with those two main headings. The first 6 verses are about God's natural law, revealed law of himself in creation. Remember verse 1, the heavens declare the glory of God. The sky above proclaims his handiwork. You drop down the next section, it's how the law of God that's written and revealed is perfect. Verse 7, the law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. Verse 11, moreover, by them is your servant warned, and keeping them there is a great reward. There is great reward. So we find that God has revealed himself in nature, but he's revealed himself completely in his word. And we must respect and honor him because of both. We should all have the plea of David as he closes Psalm number 19. This is verse 14. Let the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and redeemer. Sin, yes, it's bad, it's terrible. But chapter 3, verse 24 of Romans reminds us we all can find the justification through God's grace. And thus we can live with the same heart of David in Psalm number 19, verse 14. And our words, our thoughts, be pleasing always to God. We do thank you for your time this morning. It's our prayer that God's timeless word will be your meditation all day today.